Ladies and gentlemen, please give a Springfield, Massachusetts Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame welcome to Mr. Paul Westphal. I'm going to hand you this, and then I'll warn you right now, one of the people who makes more money than I am is going to snatch it from you and give you one with much better batteries in it. So let's trade it for the moment being. I want to ask you something, Mr. Westphal, about a conversation that you and I just had off microphone, which is, it's been a while since you've been in Springfield, Massachusetts at the Basketball Hall of Fame, hasn't it? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
When I played with the Celtics in the early 70s, we used to play the Hall of Fame game in Springfield. And that was probably 73 or 74. It's the last time I saw the Hall of Fame, and it was in a little gym on Springfield College campus, and that's the last time. So this is amazing. My eyes are wide open. I just can't get enough of looking around and seeing what it's become.
So I told you that we were going to go all the way back to Torrance, California, and I wasn't kidding. You're a Los Angeles area guy. Grew up in Torrance, went to Aviation High School, the now defunct Aviation High School, in the late 60s. Can you talk to us a little bit about the way that experience, that era, that time, your life at home helped to shape the person and the basketball life that would eventually end up with an enshrinement in the Basketball Hall of Fame? When did you start to see the love of basketball in your life?
Well, I started loving basketball in Redondo Beach, which is where I grew up, right next to Torrance, where I was born. And I had an older brother, Bill, 7 years older than I am, and he and my dad used to be playing basketball in the backyard, and I'd want to play. And they wouldn't let me because they said, you can't even throw the ball up to the basket. And so my dad would make my brother give me the ball to prove that I could get it up to the basket, and I couldn't. And then one day it went in. Underhand, I threw it up and went in. And so I started playing basketball that day, the day I was old enough to throw the ball up to the basket. But it was, the Lakers moved to town, I think, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and Elgin Baylor was the first star that I ever just was agape at, watching what he could do. And so I wanted to be like Elgin Baylor and play basketball, and be like my big brother and play basketball. And so just grew up playing in the backyard, and my brother was a real good player. He was able to play at USC. And along the way, it seemed like I was able to do a little bit better than he had done, and I knew I was going to probably be tall enough to play, so I just set my goal and trying to learn to play. And I always would try to find people that were older than me, that were better than I was, and just keep playing, you know, with the better players, and learn how to play with guys that really knew how to play. And we grew up pretty close to Compton, if you know the geography out there. And so there was a school, a junior college, El Camino Junior College, where all the players from all around LA would meet and play. So I was playing against the best players in California, whether they were pros or college players from UCLA or the other high school kids from the area, and just grew up loving to play and competing. If you won, you stayed on the court. If you lost, you had to go sit and wait, and so you had to learn how to win. And just loved playing, and had great environment to learn how to play. Great encouragement from my dad and from my older brother, and just there was nothing that ever, you know, I kept going from one level to the next, and pretty soon I was with the Boston Celtics.
Just like that. That's the recipe. Just keep playing and you'll end up in the Celtics. Of course, for college, you mentioned your brother went to USC. You also choose Coach Bob Boyd and the Trojans of Southern California. And that 71 team for yours is still among one of the greatest in school history. And I think about those wins that you had over UCLA that not only helped to write the USC legacy, but also really changed the path of some of those UCLA teams in Pauley Pavilion. If I'm not mistaken, those were among the first Pauley Pavilion losses that UCLA ever took. Can you reflect back on that time at Southern Cal and think about which of those accomplishments 50 years later still stand out for you?
It's hard to imagine today, but it was a time before ESPN. To watch a basketball game, a college basketball game, was a rarity. I mean, there may be some local television, but that's it. But the two best college teams in the country were USC and UCLA. We were number 1 and number 2 in the nation the whole year. And this was in 1971. And they had John Wooden, they had, it was Lou Alcindor at the time, and then he later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but it was between his year and the Walton years. They actually had a team of five All-Americans that I played against. Sidney Wicks, Curtis Rowe, Steve Patterson, John Vallely, Henry Bibby. That was their starters. But we were, SC was the little upstart school in basketball compared to UCLA, who won the championship every year. And I was one of the big reasons I went to USC, in spite of forfeiting a chance to play for the legendary, great John Wooden, was to try to beat them. I thought it would be like harder to beat them than to win another championship with them, and it was. We couldn't beat them in a game that counted. Anyway, my junior year, we went 24-2, and we lost both games to UCLA. We were number 2 in the nation. We were number 2 in the conference. We were number 2 in Los Angeles. But we beat them the year before, but we couldn't beat them that year, and so we had the second best team in the country and didn't get to go to the tournament. Because that's the way that's the way college basketball was then. If you didn't win your league, you didn't go to the NCAAs. So they remember our team as probably being the greatest team ever that didn't get to go to the NCAA tournament.
And that, I would argue, still stands. That is absolutely stands. Then in '72, the Boston Celtics make you the number 10 draft pick in a draft that included Julius Erving, Bob McAdoo. You'll be the 3rd Hall of Famer from that draft class when September rolls around. And now, you mentioned an era before ESPN. The draft experience for you in '72 was very different than the draft experience of Zion. And can you talk about your draft day experience?
Well, it was, you can't even believe this. If you watch the NBA draft on TV now, that isn't what it was like. First of all, I injured my knee halfway through my senior year. I didn't get to finish my senior year. I tore up my left knee, and I had surgery, and I had my leg in a cast. And there was doubt as to whether I'd even be able to recover and play. And so, in retrospect, that was a blessing in disguise, because it meant that I got drafted by the Celtics, whereas if my leg wasn't in a cast, I probably would have got picked higher. But to be able to start with the Celtics, with the team they had then, with John Havlicek and Dave Cowens and Red Auerbach as the president and Tommy Heinsohn as the coach, that was such a blessing to be able to play with that group. But anyway, going to the draft day, this is how the draft was then. Isn't the draft tomorrow? Yeah, they're supposed to draft tomorrow. And so I listened to the radio, and I thought I heard that I got drafted. I mean, there was no television coverage. I had to wait till the next morning to read the paper. And it wasn't on the first page of the LA Times, it was on like page 5. There's a little list, NBA draft, and it's like, well, so-and-so got drafted. Yeah, I got drafted by the Celtics. Great. You'd think they'd call me or something. I didn't hear a word for 3 days. I said, well, I got drafted by the Celtics. That's great. My leg's in a cast, but, you know, maybe I should be okay. They sent a telegram. Red Auerbach's secretary, Mary Whalen, sent a telegram. She didn't know the difference between the University of Southern California, and there's a school called Southern California College in Orange County. She sent my telegram to Southern California College, And some professor found it sitting in some inbox and then said, hey, that guy, Westphal, he goes to school at University of Southern California. I'm going to send the telegram over there. So I got the telegram 3 days late saying, you've been drafted by the Boston Celtics. Congratulations. Call Mary Whalen, collect. And we'll arrange a trip back to Boston for you. That was the draft in 1972.
Paul, that story is unbelievable. There's a metric
I didn't get a free suit. I didn't get to go to dress up.
You didn't even get the hat.
You know, didn't get a hat, nothing. I read about it in the paper in page 5 of the LA Times.
And then
Telegram
waited.
3 days late.
There's a metric, there's a bizarro world where that professor doesn't find the telegram and you're still waiting. You're like, I'm sure my time's a-coming. After 3 years, you're traded to Phoenix. But that doesn't mean your ties with the Celtics end, because in 1976, Game 5 of that finals series is widely regarded by hoop nerds like me, and especially people who played it, as the greatest game ever played. 3 overtimes. I mean, if you go back and watch, each of those overtimes felt like a lifetime. How special was it to be playing that game against your former teammates and your friends who essentially helped welcome you into the NBA?
Well, it was very interesting. I know when I got, first of all, I was the first player the Celtics had traded in 10 years.
Were you?
They never made trades. Next, so I got traded for Charlie Scott, and it was interesting because I was really, my chance to really be a starter with the Celtics had just arrived. I'd never started one game in the 3 years I was there because Don Chaney and JoJo White never got hurt, and they started every game. But Don Chaney had jumped to the ABA, and it was my turn to move up the ladder, but then I got traded for Charlie Scott. Next thing you know, I'm out in Phoenix, who'd had a terrible team. And so it was really an upset that we were able to knock off the team with the best record in the league, the Warriors, and then meet my old team in the finals. It was something nobody expected. And to be playing the Celtics in the Boston Garden after having been a sub with them for the previous 3 years was very surreal. And it was, I was comfortable. I mean, I was as comfortable in the Garden, and I knew those guys, so it wasn't like it was intimidating, but it was still, it was hard. That was not a scenario that anybody wrote out before the season, so it was pretty special.
And now I hinted earlier that you're going to get the chance to ask Mr. Westphal some questions. So after this next question, I'm going to ask for volunteers. If you want to start thinking about something you'd like to ask a Hall of Famer, now would be your time to start thinking about it. What meat have I left on the bone? And then you'll get your volunteer questions will get you in a line, but I still have a couple questions left, but I just want to get your brains working here for us. So when your playing career ended, you really wasted no time moving to the end of the bench, moving from coaching, first at the college level, right in the Phoenix area, and then a couple of years later, 3 years later, as an assistant with the Suns. For some people, that adjustment is difficult, going from being a future Hall of Fame player to trying to teach it. Can you think back to the big hurdles that you might have had to overcome, or was it a natural fit for you?
How long do you have? There's no way to map out a life in advance. I always wanted to coach, and I studied. I was around fantastic coaches. I mean, I almost every coach I ever played for is either in the Hall of Fame or you could make a great case that they should be. You know, I was close with John Wooden, even though I never played for him at UCLA. I was close to him till he died. I was, you know, hanging around with Red Auerbach. Tommy Heinsohn's in the Hall of Fame. I played for Lenny Wilkins, Red Holtzman, Hubie Brown. Wow. They're all Hall of Famers. John McLeod, my coach in Phoenix, should have been. Bob Boyd, my college coach, is right up there with any of them. And it's just amazing the people I was able to learn from, and then even being teammates with Pat Riley, Don Nelson, you know, these pretty much every Hall of Fame coach I was real close to. So I studied them all, and I wanted to coach. And so when I retired, I thought it would be a natural thing to go into coaching. And I went a whole year, I couldn't get a job. Nobody, well, you don't have any experience. I don't. Thought I did. I played 12 years. I learned from all these people. No, couldn't get a job. And it's funny. My wife and I are Christians, and we prayed. We said, "Well, God, if there's a job out there for me, I'll take the first one." Went a whole year without, couldn't get one. So I get a call one day from a guy who I didn't know, and he says, "You don't know me, but I want to offer you my coaching job." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I'll meet you for lunch. I have to meet you." So this guy's a flake. I'll go meet him, though. What else am I doing? So I went and met this guy, and he said, "Again, I want to offer you my coaching job." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I'm the coach at Southwestern Conservative Baptist Bible College. Have you ever heard of it?" I go, "No." It was about 5 miles from my house. It only had 200 students. 150 of them were girls. But somehow they had a basketball team. And the guy says, "The president won't let me quit because unless I get somebody to take my place, and the job doesn't pay anything." Figured since you've been in the NBA for 12 years, you could afford to take this job. So I want you to take my coaching job, please. I need to earn a living.
Please.
And I go, "Well, where do you play?" He goes, "Well, we play at Desert Cove Elementary, Junior High School, and we practice at Roadrunner Park, outdoors." Wow. I go, "When do you practice?" "Oh, like twice a week, outdoors if the guys don't have choir." I mean, this was the team. This was the first coaching job I got offered. I look up, I go, "Really, does this count? If it doesn't pay anything, is that a coaching job?" And I took that job. And I had to raise all the money. I picked the school colors because they didn't have uniforms. So I got a deal on some blue uniforms, so the school colors became blue.
Paul, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable story. And it's interesting. I formulated a golf tournament to raise money. Pete Maravich came out and spoke. Elgin Baylor was there. My agent was a football agent, so he had Dan Fouts and Franco Harris. And
wow.
They came out to this golf tournament. We raised enough money to be able to stay in hotels on the road, as long as we had roommates. But that was my first coaching job, and they had won 3 games the year before. And we ended up, and we played against schools that you'd never heard of: American Indian Bible College, Arizona Auto. I mean, that's who we played against. It's the littlest level of college basketball you ever heard of. But that was my first coaching job, and I took it just because this guy called me. Yeah. And didn't pay a thing. And 3 years later, I was the assistant with the Phoenix Suns. Man. And with a guarantee to be the next head coach when Cotton Fitzsimmons retired. If I didn't take that job, I probably never would have coached.
That gives all new meaning to the phrase, "trust the process." That is an incredible story. Do you have questions for Paul Westphal? If you want, and you do, raise your hand. One of the great Who Paul staffers will come by. I only have 3 more questions. Then my job becomes your job. So put your hands in the air, and one of the great Who Paul staffers will formulate a line to my right, your left. So you mentioned Cotton Fitzsimmons. And in 1992, you elevate to the role of head coach. And that Phoenix Suns team, you want to talk about a team for an era. We're talking about some guy named Barkley, some guy named Marley, Ainge. I think Celtics fans have heard of that name or something. KJ, Kevin Johnson. That team was as much personality as it was talent, and it was big on both. Can you talk about what makes, in your mind as a coach, that team so special? You guys go all the way to the finals, where you met, of course, the Jordan-led Bulls. Talk to me about that team, if you will.
Well, that team was balanced and mature and special, talented. I mean, we not only lost to the Bulls in the toughest series they had. The next year, the next 2 years, we lost in 7 to the eventual champions. That was Hakeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets. So for 3 years, we had a team that with one bounce of the ball, we could have won 3 titles in a row, didn't. But it was amazing. The one year when we had Danny Manning, I think we had one of the greatest teams of all time before he got injured.
Yeah.
And it was so special, but it had incredible talent and character with guys like Danny Ainge, Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, Mark West. We had, but it was all built around Charles Barkley. And if you're too young to only know Charles Barkley by watching him on TNT, you don't really understand. This guy was a hair under 6'5", and he was the best rebounder in the league. He was a dominant inside player at that size, and his personality was so large that he just captured the whole state of Arizona. When we lost in the finals to the Bulls, the state of Arizona only had 3 million people. They had a parade on the hottest day of the year. Now, it's hot in Arizona. It's like 115 degrees. They had 1 out of every 10 people in the state were at this parade. 300,000 people at the parade outdoors to celebrate that team. And it was all about Charles Barkley. I mean, he certainly was more than Charles. You can't just win with one player, but he was the catalyst that lit the fire in Phoenix to really take a franchise that was dead in the water about 4 years ago. They had a big drug scandal, and it looked like the team was going to have to move, and it was at rock bottom. And then with the addition of Tom Chambers, and then eventually Charles, and that group, it was one of the iconic teams, really, to never win a championship that anybody can remember.
Now, Paul, my last question for you before I bring in the tough questions. The first guy right over there in the Thunder jersey, I can tell he's going to bring it really strong. My question for you sort of goes back to where you and I started. We talked about the time that had elapsed since you'd been here in Springfield. But I want to ask you what this moment right now is like for you. It'll be the first time you're here in 40 years, but it'll also be the last time you're here before your face is alongside all of the ones that are above us right now. Can you just reflect for those of us who will never be enshrined in any Hall of Fame, what is the, no offense, a couple kids out there, they're like, hey, wait a minute, my goal is to be up there.
You don't know that.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I'll speak for me. My shrink would appreciate that. What's this moment like?
It's interesting. It's hard to put my finger on it because I've been involved in basketball a long time. I can remember like yesterday being a little kid like this guy over here with the Boston Celtics jersey on, just, wanting to watch a game and wanting to go out and really rather go out and play. And to be able to take each step and touch the people along the way that I've been able to touch and be touched by, to me, that's the mystery of this. I mean, I'm just a little kid from Redondo Beach who liked to play basketball, and just nobody ever was able to make me stop playing. And now I'm looking back and saying, this Hall of Fame is really, in my mind, it's for Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell and John Havlicek and Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan, and here I am. I was blessed to be able to play and to play against and with some of the iconic people in this sport, but it's hard to wrap my mind around that I'm being inducted here as well. So it's humbling, and it's about as special as it gets.
Well, this Hall of Fame is also for Paul Westphal. So those names, yours is right next to it, and it deserves to be. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up my portion. Please give a thank you round of applause to Mr. Paul Westphal. So, Now here is the next portion. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to welcome us in one at a time. So if you want to come in here, buddy, you're more than welcome to. I only have 2 requests for those of you who are going to ask questions. The first is that you introduce yourself to Mr. Westphal before you ask, and the other is that you just allow me to hold the microphone while you're asking, if that's all right. All right, come on over, buddy. What's your name?
My name is Ben.
Hi, Ben. Would you like to ask a question?
Who's the best player that you ever coached?
The best player I ever coached was Charles Barkley. And he was a fantastic player, and 2 things about Charles. He's a great competitor and he's a clown. As long as you remember that and keep him straight, you'll be fine. But
Okay.
it was fun every day coaching that guy.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
Good job, Ben.
I like that Russ jersey. All right, bring it in, bud. How are you, sir? Go ahead, introduce yourself first.
Hi, my name is Stan.
Hi, Stan.
I just was wondering, if you had the choice, would you stay with the Celtics?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I never wanted to be traded from the Celtics. I was looking forward to hopefully playing my whole career with the Celtics, but I got a call, got traded, and moved out west to Phoenix, and that's the way basketball is sometimes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. So I have to ask, and I know, here, come on in. You got the telegram after the draft. Did you learn about the trade, at least in a more timely fashion?
The trade, the NBA used to have an opportunity to take a summer trip with other players. And it was the NBA Players Association hooked it up, and it was a trip down to Brazil. And we left from Boston, and we were changing planes in New York to fly to Brazil with the NBA Players Association. I got the call at the airport, at JFK Airport, saying, "Hey, you've been traded." I got to catch a plane. Okay, I guess instead of flying back to Boston, we'll fly back to Phoenix.
Change the return flight. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thanks. I'm Blake. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Blake.
I was wondering, who was the toughest defender you ever had to go up against? And conversely, who was the toughest assignment you ever drew defensively to have to mark?
Oh, that's a great question. The toughest defender was a tie between John Havlicek and Norm Van Leer, the guard. He was Jerry Sloan's running mate in the backcourt with the Chicago Bulls, and he was a tenacious, tough defender who just seemed to be in my head. He knew that if I was going to spin this way, he was there, and if I was spinning that way, he's there. He's always buzzing around underneath me. He was a pain. He was really, really good. And John was deceptively great defender. I mean, he just was always in great position, and he was really good with hand checks, and the refs never called it. But but those 2 guys, and the toughest guy for me to guard was Tiny Archibald. He was just so quick, and whatever. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that very much. I let the other guy guard him.
2 Celtics.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Great questions. I told you these were the good questions. I waste our time. I should just get to these guys quicker. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a little more comfortable over there than it is out here, I must say.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, Paul. By the way, I was in Boston the other day, and I found this old telegram with your name on it. Anyway,
Does this say you've been traded?
Yeah, I said they want you back. That last fellow stole my thunder, I'm sorry to say. I was going to ask you the same question about who the toughest defender was. So my backup question is, I'm a lifelong Celtics fan. In fact, I'm a year older than you are. I've been watching the Celtics before you were. There was an old story that the parquet floor in the Garden was tampered with before teams came in to play the Celtics at home. And I was wondering if that's just a myth or there was some actual doctoring that went on before a competitor came into the building.
That's a really good question. And you know, there's this myth that Red Auerbach was this mastermind of psychology, and that you know, the visitors' locker room was like too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter, and the showers didn't work. I can tell you this from experience. the Celtics locker room was too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter, and the showers didn't work. They didn't treat the visitors any worse than the Celtics got treated, because the Bruins were the landlord and they didn't care. So as far as the floor goes, they didn't tamper with it. That floor wasn't nice enough that you could tamper with it. But it was flawed. And there were certain areas where there were dead spots that the more you played on it, you knew that if you bounced the ball right here, it's going to go down, and that it was maybe sticking up this high, the ball would bounce crooked, or if you don't dive on the floor here, because it'll take your knee off. There were certainly flaws in that floor. They were not engineered. You just had to live with them.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What an awesome clarification. Sometimes just the psychology of having people thinking you were
Right.
yeah, that's fascinating.
Red's greatest line, though, when players would come to the Garden and look around, and there's rats here, when they painted the locker room, they didn't even paint it completely. They painted around the shoe boxes that were up on top of lockers. So if you took a shoe box down, there's yellow and there's green up around here. But Red's great line was, people complain about it. He goes, if it's good enough for Russell, it's good enough for you.
He's not wrong.
First, thank you. My name's Tom. As you're talking, I just can't help but Mr. Auerbach's right behind you, and I found that interesting the whole time. But I'm a youth coach. I love coaching. I love coaching kids, obviously. And some of my favorite kids aren't necessarily my best players. You said Charles was the best player you coached. Who's your favorite player that you coached?
Well, he's right up there. I would say a player who I coached, Dan Marley, I would say no coach who ever coached Dan Marley was sorry. I mean, he would compete. He practiced hard. He was ready. He wanted to guard whoever the toughest guy was. If he got a lot of shots, great. If he didn't get a lot of shots, great. The most low-maintenance, competitive player who everybody respected, I would say he's right up there.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Congratulations.
It's a fantastic question. Thunder Dan with a nice stroke from downtown. Hey, bud. Go right ahead.
My name is Jarrell. Also, today's my birthday.
Hey, happy birthday, Jamel. This guy's birthday.
The question I was asking, who's your favorite basketball player now?
My favorite basketball player now, that's really weird. I don't think about it that much. I don't think about it in that way, but maybe Kawhi Leonard. And the most amazing player, I think, that I've maybe ever seen is Steph Curry. I've never seen anybody shoot like that guy. So those two are pretty special.
Jamel, who's your favorite player?
Steph Curry.
Steph Curry, all right. Happy birthday, buddy. All right, and our last question of the day. No pressure at all.
Can we just sit down for a few minutes and give me the mic? Very first basketball attended, 1978, Madhouse on McDowell, Phoenix versus Celtics. It goes to double overtime, and I believe you clinched the game. So that's my memory. But here's the question. I want to hear your perspective or story about Jerry Colangelo. And the second part of that question is, can you give him a call and tell him to buy the Suns back?
That's a great one. Yeah. You're not the first one to think of that. I want you to know that. No, Jerry Colangelo, one of the most important figures in the history of basketball when you think about it. And it's amazing. He traded for me. He traded me. He hired me to coach. He fired me. And he cut me once after signing me as a free agent. So I've seen all sides of Jerry Colangelo. And what he's done for USA basketball, what he's done for the Phoenix Suns, what he's done for the Hall of Fame, Grand Canyon University is an unbelievable success story, Jerry Colangelo. If you ever got to Phoenix, check it out. He's got his fingers all over everything that has been successful. And the reason is because certainly you can't have all that success without being a good businessman, a great businessman. But he's not about the business, he's about the love of the game and doing things the right way and figuring if he gets everybody to invest in a vision, that's the way to accomplish something rather than to see how much money you can make out of it. And everything he's touched has been successful, and it's because he loves what he's doing, and he loves the game of basketball. And I just think that you can't say too much about what he has contributed to basketball. It's hard to imagine what it would look like without him. I mean, he's really, truly one of the great figures in the history of the game. And without playing in the NBA, he's impacted it and basketball worldwide in an amazing way.
Thanks. You're one of his best trades, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the class of 2019's Paul Westphal. Oh, that was so much fun.